All right. Tacking Point Tavern, hey? What a show, what a show. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name's Josh. I'm got the privilege to lead Surfers for Climate. You're going to hear a bit about us in a second, but just want to kick off this kind of welcome tonight by acknowledging we're here on Biripi country and want to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Tonight we are looking to share a beautiful film with you about the co-founder of Surfers for Climate, Belinda. She's here tonight as well. We'll follow up with a bit of a Q&A with her, so all of you in the audience can ask the questions that you want to ask of her. She's a bit of a legend, so don't hold back. And I think one of the things just in this introduction, a bit of housekeeping to share. We've got a whole bunch of crew here from Surfers for Climate tonight. We're an advocacy group which wants all types of surfers to kind of join in on the action of doing something to protect the ocean, and namely from the big threat of climate change. I want to give a big shout out to the crew from Soul Surfing who are here tonight as well. We hooked up with these guys this morning for one of our programs that is on the takeoff points for Surfers for Climate. It's called the Silver Surfers. We want to try and help people over the age of 60 enjoy wave riding safely. Like most surfers, we take it for granted, that feeling of stoke that you get from getting in the water, and we're so stoked to work with the crew from Soul Surfing today to deliver a free bodyboard clinic to a bunch of pretty frothing ladies. There's one right there I can see. So they had a good time this morning at Town Beach, so huge thanks to them for supporting this work today. We are an org that doesn't just want to say no to stuff at Surfers for Climate. It's really easy in the environmental space just to say no to everything. Easiest job you can do, say no. Saying yes, though, is the hard bit. Yes is imperfect. Yes will draw criticism from people that want to point out your imperfections and how it isn't really good enough, and you might be a hypocrite for trying to do something about this big issue called climate change. But that's what we're here to talk about tonight. We've got a solutions-focused panel and some great people who can have a bit of a conversation about what we can all say yes to, because that matters. You can go through life saying no and nothing will change and nothing will get better. But if you can say yes and be okay with imperfect solutions and call that progress, well, then I think we might be able to solve a few big problems. So without further ado, I will, well, before I get to that, I want to let you know that we are selling a bunch of merch tonight. If you like what you hear, you want to support the work, the easiest way you can support it is to get a bit of the merch and support that work. And Rye, our campaigns manager, is walking around with a raffle tonight. Patagonia is sponsoring this effort tonight here, and we've got a few goodies to give away. So if you want to support the work we do, we've got a Patagonia bag, towel, hat, and a tote combo. And it's a one winner rules all, right? We're just doing one winner. Great. So if you want to support the work, get a raffle ticket. Pretty awesome. We'd really appreciate it. So we've got a panel tonight. We have some great people, and I'm going to let you know who they are. So one of our panelists tonight is Belinda. She is the co-founder of Surfers for Climate. She is one of the best longboard surfers you will ever see dance on water. She's my boss, or one of my bosses, and she's an absolute legend in this game of advocating for the protection of the ocean. She was instrumental in the fight for the Bight, which stopped oil and gas drilling in the Great Australian Bight. She was also on the front lines of stopping PEP 11, which was a huge gas project off the East Coast. And so I just want to welcome Belinda here tonight. No pressure, Bindi. Solutions are many and varied. One of the solutions that we all have as consumers is what do we do with our money? Money does make a difference in this world. Where it sits in a bank, it might be funding the thing you actually want to stop. So we do have a bit of an expert in this financial space tonight. We've got Brendon Dixon. He is the founder of Pure Finance. He is a big supporter of our work. He wants everyone to think about their money with an ethical lens, and he's going to unpack a few things about money tonight for you on this solutions focused panel. So welcome to the stage, Brendon Dixon. Thanks for coming. We also have tonight another bit of a legend of advocacy, Heath Joske. He's actually from these parts or thereabouts originally, but today he finds himself in the Great Australian Bight itself. A tremendous environmental activist, he's got the greenest thumbs you'll see on a man. And he's come all the way from Streaky Bay to join us tonight and to talk about some of the work that he's done in environmental activism and advocacy and share some thoughts on how we can protect the things we love. So welcome to the stage, Heath. And the final panellist we have tonight, it is the final, right? We've got more seats than No, it is. I don't know, I've been told there's an election coming up. We have put the feelers out to all candidates who are going to be running in this federal election, and we're so grateful tonight to have the independent candidate for Carpark, Heise. Oh, wow. After a long and successful career in nursing and public health services management, including roles as a director of hospitals in New South Wales and a board member of the Cancer Council of New South Wales, Kaz was pre-selected and endorsed as the independent candidate for Carpark. I've seen your face on a few billboards lately, and we're going to chat to you tonight about the role that politics can play as a solution to the challenges we face. So please welcome the whole panel tonight. So we're rolling with one microphone because capturing content really matters at these events. You want to be able to share on social media all the cool things that happen, and we've got a few mics attached to mics so we can make sure that is great. I want to just kick off with you, Kaz, because you're right next to me. Yeah. You've been doing the rounds of the whole stretch of this coastline. I know you've been up and back between Coffs and here today. How are you feeling about the attitudes in this region towards this issue of climate? Like, what are you hearing from people on the ground?
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's an interesting one. Like, as many of you will know, I also ran in the 2022 election, which was famously kind of dubbed the climate election. And there was a lot of climate issues to the fore last time. Interestingly enough, this time it's there, but it's there through other circumstances. So we've currently, so far, knocked nearly 9,000 doors now throughout Carpark and had 9,000 conversations with people about what they're worried about. You know, is it climate? Is it, what is it? And the things that people are most worried about, the very first one that is on the top of the list, is they feel in general that everything's getting worse, not better. And by that I mean things like, the cost of living, the housing in particular, paying mortgages, paying rent, and then insurance is attached to mortgages if you've got one there out of control as well. People are feeling like there's not enough childcare places. It's really hard to see the forest for the trees for a lot of people at the moment. And climate is there, and everyone knows that climate needs to be addressed, and they're worried. People are worried about the future. But there is also a sentiment in Carpark now that I didn't feel last time, and that is that a lot of people are just sick and tired of schoolyard politics. They're sick and tired of feeling like it's quite hopeless, the situation in politics. They know, everyone seems to know now, that the big corporations are basically ruling the country, and many of those are emitting fossil fuels. And so there's a sense of hopelessness, and what can we do? And how can we get our nose above water to feel like there's some hope, not just for themselves, but their children and grandchildren? So there's a lot of concern for future, and it's kind of social, environmental justice, and of course climate change, but it's all mixed up in a lot of disillusionment right now. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Kaz. I want to, in the political space, I guess, like Belinda, you've had a lot of experience kind of in the halls of power and seeing, you met a lot of different politicians in your time. How have you found that experience, and were there moments of hope, and what were some of the more depressing experiences that you've had from the political system?
Reluctantly walked the halls of Parliament. Firstly, it's a pretty daunting space, I think. Like, we all feel really nervous to go and talk to our elected MPs. And when you actually sit down in a room with one of them, it's actually not at all. You realise that they're just people, and at the end of the day, they're there to represent us and our values and what we want to see for our communities. And so I think most of the time, not always, we've been kind of welcomed with open ears, which is really great. So, if you've got an issue, I would say always go and engage with your elected representative, because it does make a difference. But yeah, we've had some moments, I think you and I were in Victorian Parliament actually, speaking to the representative for the Surf Coast where I lived at the time, and he really didn't want to hear what we had to say. The most excited he got during our hour-long conversation was telling us that he used to build sandcastles at Lawn Beach. And we're like, but the whole area is going to be drilled for oil and gas. Do you care? And he's like, but those sandcastles. So that was a pretty bad moment. One of our better moments, I'd say, was, we were in Parliament, a Surfers for Climate event, trying to talk to all the politicians. We hosted an event in the New South Wales Parliament at the Parliamentary Library, talking about the need to ban all offshore oil and gas and infrastructure in New South Wales waters. And, I think it was a really good experience. Everyone was there listening. There was high energy in the room. We did kind of cover the books with surfboards and pictures of surfers and fill the room with some great people. So it was a fun event, but, people genuinely wanted to hear what we had to say, which was fantastic. And, at the end of the day, we got that legislation passed. It was a bit of a tricky road to get there, but it wouldn't have happened without amazing independents and people that weren't in those major parties in the room to be able to kind of shift that balance of power. And so I think at the end of the day, it's really important that we have people there to listen to us and what we want as community members versus just, what the big corporations want.
I want to pick up on this cost of living element, Kaz, that you said, and I want to kind of pivot this over to Brendon because, you are in the financial space, you are dealing directly with people's mortgages. Just how acute is this issue for you at the moment in what you're seeing, and what are some of the things that you try to encourage people to kind of view when they look at their money as a contributor to the problem, but also part of potentially the solution?
Thanks, Josh. Hey, everyone. So in my role, I'm helping people usually when it's time to buy a property or review their finances. And, most people use finance to buy a property. And so it's often overlooked that, the bank that you use for your finance could be contributing to the climate crisis by way of, lending to fossil fuel companies or investing in fossil fuels generally. And certainly, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, so many people are coming to me and wanting to focus on cost primarily, and that is so understandable and fair enough. What we've observed, so I founded Pure Finance 14 years ago, actually 14 years this month, and when I was in banking, it was all about cost and profits, and as I've learned over the years that, customers obviously care about the cost of their mortgage, but there are other factors, which is also the cost of that mortgage ongoing. So let's say, for instance, what we've observed over the years is if you take Bank A, who may be a fossil fuel invested bank, which focuses purely on profits, and then we have Bank B, who is what we would call ethical bank, doesn't invest in fossil fuels and probably doesn't pay their CEOs big bonuses, etc. Usually goes with the territory. If both banks offered the same interest rate when you first take out your loan, through tracking for many years now, we've noticed that the banks that are more ethically operating are maintaining lower interest rates for customers in the long run. So that's been a really great aspect or a great learning for us in helping advise people on what to do. And it can also be at the very start of someone's banking journey. So let's say you're too young to get a home loan and you're maybe looking at setting up an account for your kids, and maybe instead of getting a Dolomites account, you might look at an account that's with a non-fossil fuel invested bank, because we know that those banks in time are usually the banks that people borrow from because they've banked with them forever. So I think for us, like in Australia, there's almost 100 banks, 100 lenders. About 85 of them don't invest in fossil fuels, which is pretty amazing. So there's sort of less than 10 left that are. The problem is that of those 10, more than 70% of the home loans in Australia are written by those few banks. So for me, it makes sense in terms of a climate decision, but also a cost decision to look at whether your bank invests in fossil fuels. There's a great website just called Market Forces, and you can refer to it. It's just got the list, do they, don't they? And if you're with a bank that does, then you can send them a message to the website and tell them you're not happy about it.
Thanks, mate.
Excellent.
Yeah, really good to know. I think that whole banking discussion, like financial literacy, is a big challenge for a lot of Aussies, including myself, trying to navigate how to get the best deal out of these banks and how to do it with that ethical framework, because we don't want to be adding to the problem whilst solving our own problems along the way. So no, thanks for unpacking that, Brendon. I guess I want to stick on this big investor theme, and like Heath, you and I got the chance to travel through Norway all the way to an investor meeting in a place called Stavanger on the west coast of Norway. We were there about the fight for the bite. It was something that you really lent into quite heavily as an activist and as a surfer. Do you want to unpack a bit of that experience, like maybe spin a bit of a yarn about the fight for the bite, what got fired you up about it, and also kind of where you saw hope kind of spring from along the way?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I guess my journey in the fight for the bite, starts a lot earlier on in just my journey through life and wanting to leave a smaller impact a lot of the time throughout everything I did. But I was really lucky to grow up in a family that had a great love for the ocean, and Mum grew all their own food, and we lived a pretty simple, really nice life up at Valor and Nambucca. And there was environmental fights that kicked off around that area growing up, and it was always someone else was always there to take up the fight, and I'd never pictured myself in a role of being an activist or putting my head out there and being that voice to fight these issues. And when I moved to Streaky down in the Great Australian Bight, the west coast of the Eyre Peninsula, I was blown away by the beauty of the coastline and the abundance of sea life down there, of how many people earn a crust, commercial fishing, and the percentage of the population that just loved the ocean and spent a lot of time in it. And then at the same time, we had BP applying to drill that well out in the Great Australian Bight, which would have been one of the deepest exploratory wells ever drilled. And there was a couple of the smaller communities that were already standing up and opposing them drilling down there. And Streaky wasn't one of those communities. The fight was spreading further than the Eyre Peninsula at the time. There was the Wilderness Society over in Adelaide was standing up against it, and Greenpeace was saying a bit against it as well. And it had a little bit of momentum, and BP ended up pulling the pin on that. But it was a few years later when Equinor came in and got the ball rolling again and started progressing a lot closer to actually drilling that exploratory well down in the Bight, and things seemed to be, getting a lot closer, and seemed a lot realer, the potential of them drilling that well. And we had the other little communities on the Eyre Peninsula were standing up and opposing it, and the people that were opposing it I respected massively, but no one was doing it in my little town. And it was sort of like I didn't want to be that person, but I felt like I had to. And the ocean's given me so much throughout my whole life that this was my time to have to stand up and start to say something. So we got together a little group there, and we took it to the Streaky Council and pleaded our case for them to formally oppose drilling in the Bight, which they didn't, which was a little bit upsetting. But they were one of two out of 6 councils in that area that didn't oppose it. But that began the ball rolling of that journey, and then Patagonia got behind the fight, and we ended up going over to Norway, and the fight spread so much further than Streaky, and I am so grateful that I did get involved and was able to be a part of this huge movement that just started to gather so much momentum that in the end it was sort of undeniable.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sticking on that theme of kind of stepping up in the moment, I guess, Kaz, politics isn't for the light-hearted. and it's definitely something that requires a thick skin. This is your second run at this. What was that original inspiration for you to step up? Because I think people in the audience, like everyone gets outraged from time to time about what they might see announced on television by politicians or something that's happening in their community that they're not happy about. But oftentimes I think it's really easy to be an armchair critic and kind of have your say and yell at the TV or whatever you're looking at. What was it that tipped you over from possibly yelling at some kind of expletive at the TV and then going, you know what? I'm actually going to do this?
Look, it probably was a series of things. I've always been a passionate advocate for social justice and environmental justice, and as the Executive Director of Health in this region as well for nursing and midwifery. I'm seeing things get better, not worse, the same as other people are seeing. So we know that we don't have all the health services we need. We know that our NAPLAN results in lots of parts of this region are going down. Education standards are slipping. And I just was getting more and more furious that we were kind of sleepwalking into this future, and myself included. I remember a book that David Suzuki wrote in the 1980s, and was in one of his books. He wrote, we're all on a fast train headed for a cliff, and we're arguing about who's sitting in what seat. And it feels like that's more true now than ever. And it felt like, so when the Voices for Kalpa, I didn't just put my hand up and decide to run. There's a group across this region. So for those of you who don't know where the federal seat goes from, it's from Port Macquarie in the south to Coffs in the north and out to Ebor in the west. So it covers all the coastal communities and hinterland communities in between. And we've got some beautiful natural forests here and also oceans. And so the Voices for Kalpa is this group separate to my campaign that meet in between elections, and they have what they call kitchen table conversations with people around the region. And there's about 1,000 members of Voices for Kalpa. And then when it comes around to election time, they usually put the call out to all the communities to say, is anyone out there brave enough to put their hand up and consider running in the federal election to represent us and what our community needs? And so I did that last time, and I went through an online debate and got voted by all the locals to be the person to run, and the same process happened again this time. But to be honest, I think it's a whole lot of things, and I think, look, I've got a little poem I'd like to read. This is really my why, and it's not my poem, and it's very short. It's just a stanza out of a poem, actually, and it's by a guy called Drew Dellinger. And Drew Dellinger is an American poet, and he wrote this poem called The Hieroglyphic Stairway. Now, this is the first stanza to The Hieroglyphic Stairway, and this is very much my why, and I hope you all think about this, because literally we've probably got 4 weeks till the pre-polls open. And it's really important that we consider the future. So here we go. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unravelling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles and birds were all dying? Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? And for me, this is what I'm doing. It's a very powerful piece, and everything in that poem is coming to fruition. And make no mistake, in the world right now, geopolitically, democracy is at risk. We're seeing what's happening in countries like America. We're seeing corporate takeovers of political parties in Australia, and our democracy, our grassroots voice, and the future generations is at risk in Australia right now. So I felt like I would stand up and have the biggest protest of my life, really. In a way, it's a protest. I hope it becomes a lot more than that. But even having discussions like this is really important, leading into an election, for people to think about how important every single vote is for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So coming back to you, thanks for that, Kaz, that was beautiful. Coming back to you, Heath, I just want to see if you can transport yourself back to the young, maybe you're like 19, just able to vote, living in Val Beach. Last year, yeah, sure. Would you reckon, did you ever think you'd hear a poem from an aspiring politician in your electorate?
No, I didn't. That was sensational. Thanks, Kaz. You're an absolute gem, and it's so true. Like, yeah, it's time for us all to dig in and do what we can to make this place better for our great grandchildren. And that's something that really shits me, is that all the governments, they're always just planning for the next few years. Like, how can they make the most money, or how can, and that's the way I feel like we're seeing this whole country. Where I live is massive industrial broad-scale agriculture, and everyone's just trying to get the best yield they can for that year. No one's thinking about 10 years' time, 20 years' time. What about 300 years' time? We've got to stop thinking about just the immediate future, and let's think about what's in store for our great-grandchildren.
Thanks, mate. And I guess that probably plugs in. I want to stay with you for a second. Like, what is your kind of day-to-day now? Like, you've fought the big fight against big oil in the Great Australian Bight, and what's your kind of how do you get your hands dirty on the issue these days? Pun intended.
Unintended.
Oh, it's the challenge is, how do I get them clean? But yeah, like I kind of alluded to then, now I'm living down the street here, and I've bought a bit of an acreage just out of town, which was used for industrial grain cropping and grazing sheep. It actually only got cleared the first time in the 1950s, and then cleared again in the 1980s. But my passion is growing food now for my family, and trying to spread that through the community. And it was so challenging for me at first in the old cropping paddock. Nothing wanted to go there at all. And you could see the difference between that and where my friends had blocks in town where it hadn't been cropped, it hadn't been industrially farmed, for a long time, or / if ever. Their gardens were thriving, where mine, like I was putting olive trees in one of the most hardiest fruit trees you can grow, and they were all just dying. And it was, it was pretty heartbreaking, and it was, I really had to stay persistent and dedicated to wanting to grow food. And now what really warms my heart and gets me stoked every day is just seeing how much the land is thriving now. And after all these years of pouring all the organic matter and manures and trying to maximise every raindrop that falls on the property and utilising the community's waste to build my soil, like now we're growing a great veggie garden. We've got plenty of poultry to have a roast dinner on a Sunday. We've got the fruit trees are starting to come on, and it's to see the land beyond that start to repair itself, and the wattles start growing, and the gum trees start to pop their heads up through that, and the birds returning, and the kangaroos coming back, and life just returning to that patch of land is just a really beautiful thing. And it feels like a broadacre paddock that's just been cleared completely for grain cropping. Like, it's just so quiet and so lonely, and it feels like there's nothing. Whereas you start to bring back all this life, and all of a sudden it's beautiful, you want to be there, and there's just good tucker everywhere. It's great.
Beautiful. Sounds like your hands are dirty and bloody sometimes with the poultry dinners. Yeah. I don't think I can. I'll dig a hole with you one day, but I don't think I can go to the poultry, to the butcher shop with you. Coming back to the here and now, there was a budget released recently, Brendon, and I just want to, obviously housing's a big issue in Australia. There is that mortgage stress that people are experiencing. As someone who likes to look at the numbers and look at ideas about how to solve these challenges, I'm sure it's something that comes up a lot for you, and your kind of interest around how people can get into a home and afford to be there. Is there anything that you've seen come up lately that you thought was a pretty decent idea? And is there anything that's come up that you're like, man, that's a shocking idea?
Thanks, Josh. I don't want to seem negative, but it's pretty rare that I see a good idea come up, unfortunately. The budget that came out, that didn't really see any good ideas coming out in terms of housing. There has been some shocking ideas with regards to having first home buyers use or ignore their HECS debts to help them borrow more money. Unfortunately, a lot of the solutions are just sort of band-aids, or just sort of avoiding the bigger issues, which is driving the property market. We help a lot of first-home buyers buy their own home. Talk to someone that you trust. Hopefully they've got some finance knowledge about what's possible. Sometimes this can be the case of accessing some first home schemes, or it can be a case of getting a bit of support from family by way of a guarantor, which isn't forever, is usually just for a couple of years, to help you get into the property market. The rate at which property prices are increasing and wage growth is moving, the chart is going like this, like a divide, and you just can't keep up. You cannot save quick enough. So I'm not trying to bring a downer on the topic, but a lot of the time there is a way, it's a finance knowledge gap. I think we don't get taught this stuff in school. No one teaches you, so talking to someone and finding out what's available to you can make a huge difference.
I'm going to say something on this. I just want to say something quickly on the budget. So the other thing that we need to remember is we have had the wool pulled over our eyes for a long time now. So Australian government, the federal government, is making more from tax from HECS, from student debt, and from beer tax than it is from the gas industry alone. So we're not taxing the right people. The people that are feeling the pinch all the time and their home loan dreams are getting further and further away, it is unfair that the income tax pressure keeps coming back onto all of us when the 30 biggest corporations in this country paid no income tax on their excessive incomes into the billions of dollars last year. It's not okay, and we need to hold them to account, and that's why the budgets are disappointing time and time again. We get breadcrumbs thrown our way, and the big guys, they get away with everything. And in fact, the big banks, the ones that are propping up these industries, are raking in the cash. There's a whole lot of money awash in Australia. It's just not with the people. Yeah.
On that note, little news update. So the election just got called for May 3rd officially, so that news just broke.
That means we've got 4 weeks till
4 weeks till pre-poll. There you go. Sticking on the gas subject, because I appreciate Kaz bringing it up, because this is obviously near and dear to our hearts at Surfers for Climate. A lot of our advocacy is about this perceived idea that we need more gas to solve the problem of expensive energy. Belinda, I want to chuck to you. I know this is like an area of interest for you. You've been in the game a long time. What are your thoughts on this situation with gas in the country? And just riff on that for a second. I'd like to kind of get you to unpack it a little bit more about what your learnings have been about this industry and the misleading facts that we get thrown at us from time to time.
I guess to summarise, it's all bullshit. You grow up surfing a pristine beach, like I grew up surfing on a Wabakal country in Newcastle, and all of a sudden it was threatened by Petroleum Exploration Permit 11, which was, going to be situated right out front of the beach I grew up surfing on in Swansea. And so this was one of the reasons why I started looking into this, because I was like, do we really need more gas? Is it worth risking, what we have this pristine beauty, all these animals, it's the backbone of our communities, but it's also the livelihood of most of my family members is to have this pristine ocean around us. And so, I started looking into it. The environmental protections around it are lacking, to say the least. I mean, a lot of these proposals that we see going through, a lot of the oil wells that are already out in places like down in the Otway Basin off Victoria, their spill mapping shows that if something goes wrong, we're going to have oil all over the beaches, for the whole coastline. And the same goes with what happened at the Great Australian Bight, was that we saw with Equinor's own spill modelling oil on beaches from Albany in the southwest all the way to, I think it was Port Macquarie right here. Which is just completely unacceptable, especially for a gas that we don't need. I think it's 70 or 80% of Australia's gas is shipped overseas, and they pay no tax. We don't get shit for that. And they're making profits off us, and it's just not fair. It's not on. Why should we risk our beautiful, pristine coastline, the future of our children in terms of them surfing thriving waves, and our climate for something that we get nothing back on. It's just completely unfair. It makes me so mad. And, you know, any beach that I love, I will stand up and try and stop oil and gas drilling off that coast for, you know, the animals, my son, my daughter, and for our climate. We deserve it. You know, we deserve it. We need to protect the places we love.
Thanks, Belinda. I think that's a pretty good segue then to kind of offer up some final words. As we just found out, there's a federal election just got called. Kaz is about to get even busier, even though I feel like you've been busy enough for a while. So I just want to pass around the panel just a final word on, I guess for anyone here tonight that's hearing these messages and kind of wondering, like, where do I fit into it? How do I unlock my own superpower to do something to fight for the things that I love too? Just a word each from the panel, and then I'll get you to stick around, Belinda, and we'll do a quick intro to your film. Okay, start with you.
All right, put me on the hot seat. This was not preempted, so my brain is racing. But I guess, you know, right now I'm going to say do something. And as Josh mentioned, the election's coming up, and that's one place where we can all make a difference. So let's vote for our communities, let's vote for our climate, and let's vote for our future, because it literally depends on it.
Okay, so I'll keep it brief, but if you've got money in the bank, or if you're borrowing money or doing anything money related with a bank, check the Market Forces website, see if they're invested in fossil fuels. If that bothers you, you can move banks. It's pretty easy to do. Actually, opening an account with a bank is one of the simplest things you can do. It's quite quick. And, you know, we hear about boycotts of things. This is in a way, the term would be boycott, which is where you are supporting an organisation that is doing the right thing by moving your banking there. So that would be my final tip.
I guess I would just say that it doesn't matter how small you think that your things you can do in your life are going to affect the climate or, you know, the bigger picture, but everything adds up. So, you know, absolutely everything that you do personally is all going to help. And I'd also like to say that as surfers, you know, we've had a rich history of standing up to, you know, these big issues and these big proposals that could do so much harm to our environment, from dating way back to, you know, the 60s and ever since then. And in recent years, we've been on fire. You know, we've had a big win at the Fight for the Bite. We've had another big win with the PEP 11 proposal, and a huge win down off the Victorian coastline where they wanted to do the largest seismic blasting drill. Or they wanted to do a huge seismic testing thing. It was over 7.7 million hectares, and that got stopped too. And that's all been surfer-led, along with other organisations coming along. But we should take, you know, great pride in these huge proposals that we've stopped, and never ever think that our voice is too small to change anything, because it takes one person to stand up and then everyone to piggyback on you to eventually put an end to the craziness.
And look, I'd just say, please think really carefully in the next few weeks about how you're going to vote and what matters to you. You know, we have been represented by a party for a very long time, rather than having our own representation in the Parliament. You know, as an independent, I would love the opportunity on your behalf to take our concerns and our worries to Canberra and vote on your behalf, to communicate and listen to this community and have a feedback loop that means that our voices keep getting heard. If I am on the crossbench, I'll also be lobbying very hard to actually get some resources to this region that also is an advantage of an independent. Zali Stegel, for example, has brought 300% more money into the region since she's been an independent than a party politician in her seat. So there are lots of good points about thinking about the future, thinking about having different kind of representation. If you're not sure, I would encourage you to go to my website. If you already know that you're voting for someone else, that's that's fine too. It's a democracy, and that's why these conversations are so important. Consider putting me second if you can't put me first. We're actually polling at the moment for the first time ever. At the moment, I'm polling in front in the recent polls for Carpark, so it is quite possible that the seat might change this time. In which case, we're going to shake a lot of things up and do some great work for the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaz. On that note, I'll say thank you, Kaz Heise, for joining us, Heath, Joske, Brendon, Dixon, and Belinda Baggs. Another round of applause, and we'll get into the film.
So we had a volunteer come to us at Surfers for Climate. His name was Luke Jacobson. He was an awesome filmmaker, but he wanted to volunteer his skills, his superpower for good. And so Josh and Luke got talking, and they somehow decided to make a film on me, which I reluctantly agreed because I thought, well, if my journey into activism and the things that I care about might be able to potentially inspire one other person to do something good, then that was enough, because maybe that one other person might then inspire somebody else, and then all of a sudden there was a chain reaction and this whole community of ocean lovers who are actually giving a shit and doing amazing things for our planet. So that's why we made the film.
Yeah.
Even though it's scary to be playing a film about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I can appreciate that. That's a fantastic intro. Thank you, Bindi. So look, we'll kick on with the film now. Just a reminder, we do have the raffle going on tonight. We've got some merch over there if you want to support us. And I think what we may do is do a bit of a Q&A with the audience after the film. So if you like what you see, if you've got questions that come up afterwards, please feel free, stick around, come and sit at the front. And Bindi and I'll do a little bit of a Q&A up here afterwards. So on with the film. Cool. Another round of applause for Belinda Baggs here. What a legend. So we thought we'd kind of like start a little bit of Q&A if anyone's got any questions for Belinda, but I'll kick off because nobody ever puts their hand up straight away. We've done this a few times. You've come across a lot of solutions in your time. There are a few in that film. You were learning about seaweed. You were learning about blowholes that can like create energy. That's kind of cool. What's the single solution that excites you the most out of all the things you've seen and heard and been able to experience in your time in this kind of like environmental advocacy world?
I don't actually think I have one, to be honest. I feel like it's a collection of all those things, like the fact that, you know, we can sequester carbon out of the ocean by growing seaweed and then feed it to cows and they don't fart anymore. Like, that's so rad. And then, I was really stoked on, like, the whole idea of renewable energy, right? Like, getting us off of, you know, dirty, polluting fossil fuels and the very things that we're always saying no to in our oceans, oil and gas wells. Is, you know, that these solutions already exist. Like, you know, we've got wind, we've got sun, we've got lots of wave power. And then, of course, always listening to powerful First Nations voices and people who have held knowledge and taken care of this land for tens and thousands of years. Like we heard from with Jessie in the film, who is actually, I think she grew up in Bonny Hills in Port Macquarie and was an amazing bodyboard champion of the area. So, I think all of them, to me, is just as important as one another, and it's important that they all work together in order to, you know, lift us out of the situation that we're in.
Thanks, Bindi. Any questions from the audience? Anything come up for anyone? We've got Lulu's going to kick around. Come on, someone can throw a hand up. Come on, go on. Go we go.
Yes.
How you going there? I work in education and I'm a strong believer that knowledge is power. And with too much information, I just want to know where you go to get your information about this sort of stuff, especially, because knowledge is power. You want to know more, you want to know what you could do, and I find when I'm searching, I get lost, and you know, there's a lot of companies out there that are doing it for the wrong reason, so just trying to find accurate information.
I Okay, I'm going to go first. For me, I've always looked towards the Climate Council for a lot of climate facts. I know that they undertake a lot of really in-depth studies, and so that's always been a big one of mine, is to lean into their knowledge of other scientists. So also, looking at the UN climate reports, and as much as I guess in some ways we're pointing the finger at the government for not protecting the planet a lot. A lot of government websites as well have really great factual information that you can lean in on and add to that.
Yeah, I'll chuck a couple of things in there. What's interesting is those websites are full of jargon that the average Aussie doesn't understand either. So that's not very helpful if you get to a website and you don't know what's going on there. So I think, yeah. And like we're inside that echo chamber of the environmental movement, and we're pretty wonky about it. We read all the stuff and, we get all the jargon. But I think like one of the places that people can look for accurate information that's digestible is to organisations such as Surfers for Climate or, Friends of the Earth, the Australian Conservation Foundation. All of these non-profits, we're focused in trying to unpack all of this because it is really complex. But I think one of the unique things that we're trying to do is really, I'm never going to use the word dumb it down, but simplify it. It doesn't have to be that complicated. We had a panel discussion not long ago, and the simple fact was we just burn too much stuff. Like, we've just got to burn less stuff for energy. If we're burning less, we're having a smaller impact. So keep it simple. And try to look at history. Like, there's a big debate about wind turbines, right, across Australia, in the ocean and on land. Now, this is that whole problem of there are no perfect solutions here. There are costs. When you develop anything, you're going to have an impact. So we've got to get used to measuring the cost and accepting it and being okay with it after we've done everything we can do to mitigate it. But this isn't a new idea, getting the wind to spin a turbine and give us energy. Like, we've got windmills in Australia that have rusted out and served their purpose decades ago. So I think just looking at history and seeing what was working before we started burning coal, oil and gas to power our world, that's also an opportunity as well, because there are some very simple solutions out there. Any other questions from the audience? Does anyone want to chuck a hand up?
Hey, thanks. Do you ever meet any of the people who are proposing or supporting oil and gas projects, and how do they justify it to you, or how do you think they justify it to themselves, when obviously, like, everyone here thinks they're the bad guys and selling out future generations?
I don't know, there's a few things that have come to mind. When we were in New South Wales Parliament trying to get the ban on sea mining off New South Wales waters, I was actually chatting to a random guy that was there, and he was so lovely. And then he walked out with the people from Asset Energy, and I was like, you dick. You were just pretending to be nice, but actually you're not nice. But the reality is that I think a lot of these people actually are nice people. There's a lot of people out there that are working, like my cousin is a coal miner. My auntie works on the conveyor belts that come out of the coal mines in Newcastle in the office. She's not down the mine. Although that would be rad if she was down the mine. But, I think it's really important to know, or to sort of acknowledge, that people that work in that industry aren't necessarily the bad guy. As much as we do want to point the finger, they're just making a living for their families. And so it's about taking everybody along the journey. I guess there probably are some pretty evil assholes in offices, in high-rise buildings that are making, lots of coin on the side. And I personally haven't really encountered them. I'm too bogan and at the beach to be to be talking to those types most of the time. But Did you want to, if you had some experiences too?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting, the way you asked the question, I was like, oh, whoa, we don't hate on these guys. And it's really interesting because a lot of surfers are fly-in, fly-out workers who often work in mines, particularly if you're in WA. The amount of mates I have from WA that are working on a gas rig off the Northwest Shelf, or they're working, getting copper or whatever mineral they're digging up out of the earth. Like, they are not the enemy of this. But I think, to be really brutally honest, the worst thing the environmental movement broadly has done is demonise the worker. And that has backfired significantly. And it's been done. And that's something that we're really sensitive about. And I think I'll share a small anecdote. I had a mate of mine I grew up with. I'm from Foster, by the way, just down the coast. Went to high school with him, and he called me up the other day. He's a surfer. Hadn't spoken in years, and he goes, "Oh, I like what you're doing. That's really cool." And look, I'm working in the mining industry, and it'd be great if you guys could come along and speak to the workers at the mine I'm at. I'm like, "Oh yeah, what are you doing exactly?" There was this big awkward pause. He's a guy working a coal mine. And I'm like, is it thermal or metallurgical coal that you're working with? So, like, burning the coal is a problem, right? If you're a big fan of burning the coal, you've got a problem. You know, like, that's not what we need. If you're accepting the science for what it is, we've got to be moving beyond this stuff. Using the coal to make steel, though, that's something that's going to be around for a long time still. Like, we're not going to stop doing that for a while, but people are working on it. And I think, like, we need to understand where we're at in this journey and not demonise the people who are just paying a mortgage and just trying to get the kids through school, because that's the surefire way to guarantee that we don't get anywhere at all, because a lot of people work in these industries that do support communities. And it really is on us who are advocating for the change to communicate that we see them and we respect them and we love them. They're our friends, they're our family. But also, it's more about those politicians that use them in the narrative about what we need or don't need, the real enemy here, if anything. And those corporate, CEOs who are frankly earning shit tons more money than the average coal miner or gas worker, and putting them out there on the front lines and hanging them out to dry. So the question is, what's their plan for the workforce that they're using to get the biggest profits in history? And that's a big question that we've got to try and get an answer to in the most, genuine and empathetic way we can. Do we want to get another question, or you go, Biddy?
To add real fast too that, like, it's quite often that we encounter haters in life, and like, I've had my fair share of that. I know Heath probably has as well during Fight for the Bite. And when you throw yourself out there and talk about something that, you believe in, you're going to have people come back. And, my favourite line is like, "But you wear a wetsuit and you drive a car." And I'm like, well, my wetsuit's Ulex. It's made from plants. But I do drive a car. And, the answer isn't that us as individuals need to be perfect. We're all guilty of having a footprint no matter how much we try, and it's about trying to band together to get that big systemic change so we can all move forward together versus, pointing the finger on the individual. And, hopefully people, when you talk back to them politely, will understand that, but sometimes people just love stirring the pot, so.
Thanks, guys.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, that was a scratch under the armpit, was it? Okay, cool. Just wanted to double check. All right, well, I think we've bored you enough with like opinions and stuff like that. And I think you've watched the film. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. We've got a little raffle to draw, so thank you everyone who has participated in that tonight.